All right, good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Steve Augustino. We're going to start our panel on Web RTC as technology. I have two individuals here who are very knowledgeable in the industry and are going to help us with this conversation. I have J.F. Sullivan from Xura and Christian from Deutsche Telekom. Christian warned me not to try to pronounce his last name, so he is just Christian for tonight. Thank you for helping us out here. So again, we're going to talk about Web RTC technologies and what's happening with Web RTC. JF, I think I want to start with you. Can you give our audience just really a very, very brief discussion of Web RTC and an overview of where we are with this particular technology?
So everybody here knows what Web RTC is, yes? We don't need to. Okay, so let's move from there. So we had a preparation call for this, and my contention on the call, as you remember, was that if you don't look at Web RTC from the prism of a carrier viewpoint, Web RTC is doing just fine. There's actually a number of deployments rolling out all over the world, and there's use cases galore beyond the traditional use cases we were talking about last year around customer service and engagement. There's a number of verticals that have taken off around the technology, and it's doing just fine, but only when you look at it from the prism of the enterprise business.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's a technology we've known about for a long time, right? And I'm seeing more and more discussions of are we at that tipping point now of adoption? So I'm going to ask you just, JF, are we at that tipping point, do you feel?
Oh, wow. I somehow in the preparation call, I didn't remember the prognostication was part of the panel. Yeah, I mean, I look at it from my side of the business, right? So it's interesting. We have Xura, for those of you who don't know, is a merger of the former entities of Converse and Decision, which were large message infrastructure providers around the planet. And we invested heavily into the enterprise side of the business, and specifically around A2P messaging and Web RTC-based technology. Okay, so I have a poisoned view. I'm standing too close to the exhaust, right? Given that, when I look at we have signed on at least two banks who now have embedded video communications into their mobile applications. We're working with at least two different solutions integration partners in the healthcare space to do remote medical monitoring as well as remote medical engagement of people who have healthcare issues. It seems, I would argue, I don't know if it's the tipping point, but I can certainly see the bend in the curve.
Yeah, and from the carrier perspective, it really feels it's ready for prime time. I actually do believe not only for B2B, but for the B2C business as well. It's a standard which everybody can embed in their applications, web pages, and so on. So it's ready for prime time. What's needed from the carrier's perspective is probably an alliance of the carriers to truly push it. So would actually be good to take any other carrier in this audience and kick the standardization or alliance off.
Okay, that's interesting. Is standardization as a potential obstacle here, I guess. So Jeff, I want to come back a little bit and talk about some of the verticals in particular. I mean, we know the customer management, customer communications is sort of the typical one of that. But when we were talking before, there are other verticals as well, and maybe you can dig in a little bit more about some of those use cases, particularly like in retail banking, for example.
So the reason that, from our perspective, the reason that retail banking and embracing Web RTC technology has taken off so quickly over the last, when I say quickly, it's about 4 to 5 months. It sort of really started to accelerate. And a lot of it, the acceleration is not in North America. That acceleration's happening in South America and Asia Pacific, is because the economics are absolutely clear for the bank. If you have a remote branch in Brazil, the cost of keeping a remote branch is just crucifies your operating expense, right? So you can get rid of a remote branch that has maybe 6 to 8 high-value customers in that area, close the branch down, and then do much of the mobile banking online, have the engagement with the consumers online happening through video, voice. So it's very clear. The actual numbers we looked at in one specific, our reference customer, was that it moved from a cost of around $6 to keep the brick and mortar building up for any engagement on transaction with a user in that remote community to roughly 12 cents. So the economics are there. It makes perfect sense. I think retail, I don't know for how many of you, a lot of were following Web RTC 12 months ago. And 12 months ago, all of the use cases were around customer service, customer engagement, being able to help the users, they have a problem, they're able to click on their mobile device, call to the call center. But the numbers there aren't nearly as compelling. The numbers there show, the research that we see is that you can move from, let's say, 40% customer satisfaction, and if you embed video, social media, et cetera, you can move the barometer up to around 76% customer satisfaction retention. Good numbers, but those are hard.
Still.
Right, those are great, but those aren't as hard as a number where you have in retail banking, you're literally just getting all the money returned off of the bottom line from the operating expense.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I want to remind everybody this is intended to be a discussion, so if you do have questions, feel free to interrupt me. Raise your hand. We'll get you the microphone. Those of you in the back of the room as well, you're welcome to join our discussion. Just turn our way here. We'll get you the microphone. So, Christian, back to you and back then to the operators. I mean, we've heard a couple of different interesting use cases here. Is this an opportunity for operators? What do you see about that?
Oh, it's clearly an opportunity for the operators. One, actually by bundling related services into their offering. As an operator, you are always looking for increase of revenue per customer, and this is clearly one. You could imagine that customers are willing to pay some fee for getting guaranteed QoS for Web RTC transport. Might apply in the IoT space, clearly does apply in the customer services space, and I bet many more areas exist where customers are willing to pay for it.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so as a sort of an arms supplier to all the carriers, right? So we have 350 carrier customers around the planet on 150 countries. So what we see, and again, just my own biased view, what we see, the two areas that the carriers seem to be investing in Web RTC, the one you know, they're actually trying to build out developer communities. They're trying to embrace the technology in part of their own startup incubator kind of way, where they build the tools out and they design applications specifically to either increase traffic or usage of the network. That's an obvious one. The second one is in terms of the modernization of the infrastructure itself. So whether they were already marching down a path of RCS, and that was the standardization they were going to go at, or in the general build up to their IP, embracing of IP and move to LTE, all of the technology to actually have the Web RTC gateway, to actually transform the protocol between the existing and the future layers, that's where the investments seem to be made.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so what's interesting to see, most of the Web RTC conversations are in the B2B space, and it will be interesting to hear from the audience if anybody sees use cases for the B2C space, which we could push.
Him, that guy right there.
Chris, your turn. This was not staged, no.
Just keep holding on to it. It'll eventually come on. Obviously not staged at this point.
I'll come down.
Chris, here.
All right, thanks, guys. So this is a very exciting area, in my opinion. And I also believe the whole VoLTE IMS evolution is a very exciting area. And so my question is about the collision of those two. You know, it's been said that since Web RTC is just the data plane part of it, and you can do signaling anyway, why not use IMS, right, for the telco? And I'm curious, maybe with the news yesterday of Google acquiring Jibe Mobile, and you know, the discussion around that, and the fact that Google is also a Web RTC proponent. Now they've got Jibe. You know, where is this going?
Oh, that was a carrier question.
Wow.
That was totally a carrier question, man. Totally a carrier question.
Okay, so from the carrier perspective, you see the multiple competing strategies. And as often in life, use cases and usage will actually determine what works out and what doesn't. And I strongly believe you don't want to prune too early, as you actually don't know what people are going to do with it.
And I can answer. Don't touch it. And I can answer this question with great veracity and predictive power if you can tell me answer me one question first, which is, why exactly did Google buy Drye? Depending on the answer to that question, we can go, the spread of paths available of what this means for everybody is about 179.5 degrees, right? So if it purely is just, as some people speculate, to have an equivalent iMessage-like service, and they take the Drye components out the back end, and they're just going to connect things, life is fair, and maybe they're going to do this in a very complementary, non-competitive way with the carriers, yada, 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 and peace and love and end of world hunger. If not, go swinging all the way to the other side, this could be quite disruptive for everyone involved in the ecosystem. So I don't know the answer to that question, and it really does have great bearing in terms of, to your point, how does this all relate back to the IMS investments that these guys have made? Standard IMS investment, for those of you who don't know, $5 million just gets you in the door, and there's a lot more money behind that. So, and that's only representative of what, less than 20% of the current market? Depends on the answer to the question I asked.
Yeah. Okay, we got another question.
I'd like to follow up and hear your disruptive answer.
Okay, if you, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what Drye has, what Drye was offering. Drye people are the coolest guys on the planet, by the way. I don't know how the business was working. Maybe they were doing well, maybe not, but the guys there are solid people. So I'm great, when I say what I'm about to say, great respect for the guys that are there. From a vendor's perspective, somebody playing in the space, the cool thing about Drye was not the client that they built, not that RCS client. The cool thing about Drye was all the back-end infrastructure that they created to connect all of this up, make it standard compliant, and make it sit and bolt onto the existing carrier framework. Google doesn't have that framework today. But if you have that framework, and you already have a deal with T-Mobile, and you go resurrect the deal with Sprint, you go resurrect the deal with Globe, you go you follow the logic here, then essentially you have all of the necessary components to have the infrastructure in play on that side of the space. Yes? Which means that you're actually the back-end provider. You could actually be the provisioning agent of choice for all of the componentized services for rich communications without ever having to deal with any of the other people out there. You can provide that entire framework for everybody that, let's say, enterprise businesses that can't make an investment in IMS Core, can't build out all that infrastructure, just use the services off of the back end of that. That's pretty damn disruptive.
Okay. How about
I
anybody
didn't
else?
say that's what's going to happen. I'm just like speculating. Okay.
All right. Well, let me shift gears a little bit. We're going to shift back, and I'm going to put the question to the audience. Anybody out there contemplating a Web RTC use case, and got any questions about whether it makes sense? Anybody out there going to implement it within the next 12 months? Yep. Wait, hold on one second. We'll get you a microphone. Yeah.
I don't know whether I'm going to implement, but I would like to get your opinion on Web RTC with respect to low latency applications, which are tactile internet applications, and usage in the AR, VR. Does it make sense to bring that? Because they are in the range of low latencies of less than 10 milliseconds, let's say. Is that a practical proposition for Web RTC?
I'm sorry. The question is low latency?
See, low latency applications like Google Glasses, if I use, let's say.
Okay.
And tactile internet applications which are supposed to be at least less than 10 milliseconds, let's say, or 5 milliseconds. For that kind of interactive applications, does Web RTC make sense? It's peer-to-peer. Maybe I can play peer-to-peer. I don't care, as long as I have that 5 millisecond latency, let's say, going forward for 4.5 and 5Gs, whatever we are thinking.
Okay. So does it make sense when you have low latency?
Not the way that people are using it today. Well, we were having a conversation earlier. So if I ask anybody in the audience, what is a Web RTC use case? You say, this is audience participation. I'm actually asking a question. You say,
customer response.
What?
Video chat.
Video chat, right? That's
Yep.
the logical thing. We're going to cut some code here, drop it into my some JavaScript, put it in my web page, and now I got video chat through the browser. Cool. Or embed voice, or even just do straight messaging. But nobody uses the data channel. Web RTC has a data channel. Agreed? Nobody uses a data channel. There is no use case existing today for the use of the data channel. The data channel is there. It makes perfect sense to use the data channel. It's got all the necessary security. It's got all of the structures around it. Why does nobody use this? And we were arguing about this before the session, because nobody has an actual use case for a business problem they're trying, you joined us at that point, of a business problem they're trying to solve using the data channel layer of Web RTC, which is all fully formed and available today, but nobody's got the use case to do this. I would argue, and again, I don't know if you noticed the title, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, so my level of technical depth disappears fairly quickly, but but I'm smarter than the average marketing person perhaps, but it seems to me that was where I would start to answer your question. There is a way of signaling directly across that channel which would provide a low latency performance. I don't know what your service levels that you're trying to match, but that would be the place I would start. You were going to say something.
Jeff, I have a question for you. Actually, based on the comment that you had earlier on the Google acquisition, and then also Web RTC. So I strongly agree with you on one direction where this is probably most likely headed from a Google perspective. I spent 10 years in video conferencing and licensed a codec to Google and learned an interesting lesson, so I think we all know where this is going. But what you just said on Web RTC, if Web RTC, in my understanding, is trying to bring together the lowest common denominator of all the devices out there, because no matter what the form factor is and the footprint, mobile or not, every device most likely has a browser. If that is the case, and if that's the understanding, and Web RTC has over the years grown up with good performance and all the latency issues we had in the past, why is it then that from a consumer perspective, nobody's using it to the fullest extent to do homogeneous video conferencing amongst all the platforms? Because today, as we are sitting here, we have iPhones and we use FaceTime. On the desktop, we may use Skype. Then we have any other services from Blue Jeans to whatever. So it's very, very vertically oriented, and we haven't been able to bridge the world yet. And if I talk to my parents, my wife, or whoever are my parents, I don't use Web RTC because it is not easily implemented and it's not easily accessible for the consumer. So what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
How did I get stuck with that? No, it's a totally fair question.
Yeah, Christian, I don't know if you want to jump in on this. Particularly, we were talking earlier about the peer-to-peer nature of this.
So two things. One, for a consolidation to happen, there must be a good reason, meaning some end-user benefit. One potential is peer-to-peer communication. Currently, all the communication is actually centralized. So if you take like Facebook, there is a central server system. What Web RTC allows you to do is peer-to-peer communication. And you could imagine that people are setting up their personal websites with embedded communication. So going decentral. However, again, same question remains, why should somebody transition from the current way of communicating to this more decentralized way of communicating? And this question hasn't been answered to my knowledge. Maybe you have an answer for that? I think we are all looking for it.
Yeah, I'm afraid that I don't have the secret sauce here on this one.
Sad.
No, marketing. Marketing is different than sales. We're lying by accident.
No, this is called Chief Reality Distortion Officer, you know?
There you go. And I wear it with pride. So my answer is this, is that for everything there needs to be, this is the main mantra for everybody who's ever worked with me, there needs to be a problem that you're solving. You describe the availability of technology and a solution that could be provided, except that what you also described is a number of people who are already vested in closed systems, who've already got a vertical niche problem that they're solving. And they are absolutely disinterested in opening up the kimono and working with everywhere else, right? So that's an obstruction part. As soon as you have a problem that needs to be solved, people will go along and solve it. There are people who are investing some pretty cool technologies right now. Twilio has, 160,000 developers. They're probably, by and large, the 800-pound gorilla in this space. But even TalkBox, Nexmo, CafeX, Candy, all have legions of developers building stuff. Eventually, somebody's going to build something. It's just a matter of time. Where we are in the industry is we're still at the beginning. You have to keep in mind, it's been around for about 4 years. We've been talking about it seriously for about 3 years. We really started to get some traction about 18 months ago, and this year, people are actually starting to make money. So from a time of evolution, I think it's just a matter of time to, sooner or later, why is Snapchat cool? Because there was already WhatsApp, there was already Viber, KakaoTalk, Line, WeChat. Why is Snapchat cool? Because somebody decided, I want this thing to disappear at a certain period of time. Simple use case, they solved this problem. Or, I'm sorry, I was thinking of Instagram, but I'm thinking Snapchat in terms of verticalizing a story, beginning, middle, and end, right?
You made a very interesting point. Snapchat was cool.
What?
So this is a very different definition of problem to be solved.
Sure.
So, typically if we talk about problem solving, we have this B2B approach, we analyze the business processes, blah, 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 and we are going to get this ROI. This is the problem solving approach. So here, if we want Web RTC to be more successful in the consumer space, the definition of problem needs to be expanded. It's probably about coolness and attracting people because it's fun to use. That's what requires here. So,
I wasn't going to agree with him, but that's correct.
That's very good. It's a very interesting point. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave us at that point here. And
we're looking for the answer to this here from the audience.
That's
Steve.
right. One of you can tell us, right? Is it cool enough to use now, right? Or does it solve the? I was actually going to ask, but I don't think we really have enough time. What the question I heard was talking really about interoperability, and is interoperability enough of a problem? And I sensed that from both of you, it seemed like not really. It's not seen as a problem.
It's a huge problem, but the problem to solve that fixes the problem hasn't been defined. The usage case scenario of somebody sitting in Viber and needing to interact with WhatsApp as one common example, that's not a problem for the user. The user goes and adds the other person in.
Right.
The overriding Uber problem that says they want to go do this because they want to, I don't know, what's a hover car example? They want to do joint browsing across something, and they're going to do group buying or some kind of diamond, and that's the app that they're going to build, and it requires that interoperability that drives the interoperability to happen. That problem hasn't been designed, identified, and then tried to be solved.
Yeah. There we go. All right. So hover cars and interoperability here on the Spotlight stage next year. Anyway, all right. Thank you all very much. Thank you, my panelists. You guys were terrific. Give me a round of applause.